Hello and welcome to Jay Coletti's Racket Reviews. My name is Jay Coletti, and I will be your hostess, or should I say ghostess, for this episode. Here on Racket Reviews, we are dedicated to learning about all things organized crime, and today I am really looking forward to having a conversation with you about Mafia ghosts and hauntings. The subject of unsettled spirits does seem to line up pretty well with organized crime and, more conveniently, the month of October. If you're enjoying the channel and would like to become a Racket Reviews patron, please head on over to that Patreon account and join the Coletti family. Now, without further ado, we have much to discuss. So let's get right to it. Ghosts and the Mafia seem like they would go together like spaghetti and meatballs, but I was surprised to find that apart from a few stories I'll be sharing with you today in this special episode, and some others that I came across, there just isn't much content when it comes to Mafia hauntings. You would think that evil men, some surely with restless spirits, who burn images of saints and get killed in elaborate and vengeful methods, would be prime real estate for hauntings and ghostly sightings, but alas, there is a seeming lack. That's not to say that there's none, and rest assured I do intend to at least send one chill down your spine during this episode, but in my research I found what seemed to me like a lack of spooky, undead Mafia content. Even in cinema, with the topic that seems ripe for production, there is a lack of organized crime representation. There are a few things here and there in terms of entertainment. The Sopranos had their fair share of ghostly dream sequence episodes and reflections of dead friends and mirrors. There's even an entire episode of the show wherein Bobby Bacala's children are frightened by the idea of speaking to their mother beyond the grave by using a Ouija board. As a quick PSA, I would strongly advise against using things like Ouija boards. Now, you can take my advice or leave it, but I don't recommend calling in to spiritually dark places because you never know what might answer you. There are entire videos on YouTube as well as Reddit threads and other places online discussing the theories and messages surrounding the supernatural elements in The Sopranos, and if you've never looked into that particular rabbit hole before, it's definitely worth your time. Although, it will probably make you want to watch The Sopranos again. In The Godfather as well, there's a well-known ghostly image during Vito Corleone's funeral scene that appears on Michael's left shoulder. With enhancement technology, movie buffs have confirmed that this was in fact the face of actress Morgana King, who portrayed Mama Carmela Corleone. Carmela Corleone was seated next to her son in the scene, and the lenses used to maintain the texture in the film actually reflected her face onto Michael's chest in this scene. It was a strange but perfectly explainable accident that has led to years of speculation. Others will still insist, however, that there is more to it, and perhaps this ghostly face is someone else. I hate to burst your bubble if you are in that group, but Coppola himself has confirmed that this was simply a mistake with no additional meaning to it. I would actually argue that in terms of ghosts in The Godfather, the ghost of Vito Corleone haunts the entire second movie. Even if you remove the prequel portion of the film about Vito's life, his absence in the present weighs heavy on the plot and is reflected by the characters like Frank Pentangeli, Hyman Roth, and certainly Michael, acting in ways which The Godfather would not approve of. I would even say that all three of these characters get their dues for going against The Godfather, even though he's dead. Pentangeli and Roth met their demises, and Michael, who lets everything he loves slip through his fingers in an attempt to run his father's business contrary to his father's wishes, are all consequences of messing with The Godfather even beyond the grave. How's that for a deep dive? I think it would even be fair to suggest that the ghosts of both Vito and Santino, although not physically seen, haunt the events of The Godfather 3. But we don't talk about The Godfather 3 on this channel. Anyway, back to the reported ghost stories of real Mafia haunts. There are two locations that really stand out as having the most reported sightings or legends. The first is the place of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, an event we have covered thoroughly on the channel already. However, just to refresh your memory, although the real story technically remains unsolved, it is most widely accepted that Al Capone ordered the murder of 7 of rival bootlegger George Bugs Moran's men on February 14, 1929. Capone's men disguised themselves as police officers, raiding Moran's car garage meeting place and lining the men up against the wall. Once all the men were lined up, the alleged police officers pulled out machine guns and murdered all of them execution style. It's reported that a total of 70 rounds of ammunition were fired into the victims. A dog was also present during this attack, and I promise that actually does mean something later. Although Capone was in Florida at the time of the massacre, most believe that he had ordered the hit against his rival, including Bugs Moran himself. Given the fame of this story, and the fact that so many mobsters were wiped out all at once, it's not surprising that there have been sightings or ghostly images that are found at the location of the scene of the crime. The site of the attack looks much different now than it did in 1929. The grassy area connected to a Lincoln Park parking lot seems like a rather unassuming little spot, but for the organized crime enthusiast, this patch of grass is sacred ground, as it were. The area is also surrounded by apartment buildings, and the residents within say that the area is a hotspot for spooky encounters. Aside from the dark aura of fedora-wearing shadows, many report hearing the sound of a barking dog in the area, even when there is no such animal around. Now, I have to interject here as somewhat of a skeptic. I cannot honestly tell you that seeing fedoraed figures and hearing a dog bark is compelling evidence at this location. Number one, dogs are everywhere, even if you can't see them, especially in Lincoln Park. And number two, the fedora-wearing people in the dark, the shadowy people that you see in the dark wearing fedoras and dressed in that type of attire, could very easily be an enthusiastic Mafia lover who's LARPing as mobsters at that time, at that location. More interesting reports, in my opinion, claim that a distant echo of machine gun fire is frequently heard there. Although, I mean, it is Chicago that we're talking about. Most interestingly, in my opinion, are the reports about the outlines of the victims. It's reported that when it snows in the area, that the imprint of 7 bodies will be found in the powdery ground coverage. The bodies of the victims remaining sunken into the snow as a haunting reminder of the massacre that took place here. That is perhaps one of the eeriest reports of the site of the most sensational septuple murder in American history. Although there are no pictures, of course, perhaps a few decades ago, this might have given me a bit of a chill. But the fact that everyone has a camera on them at all times these days, and yet we have not seen a single photo of this creepy phenomenon, gives me a bit of hesitation when it comes to believing these reports, although they do spook me a little bit. Although it could be argued that the afterlife of the bricks in the wall against which the victims were lined up is more fascinating than the afterlives of the victims themselves. A man by the name of George Patey paid a high price, thousands of dollars as he explained, to purchase the bricks of the wall of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The original idea was to display these bricks in his home as a macabre decoration. Esquire magazine even featured this on a list of their dubious achievements. Soon, however, entertaining house guests with his bit of Mafia history wasn't satisfying, and Patey attempted to open a crime museum in 1969. He picked a bad time, as the 60s themselves were filled with plenty of murders, assassinations, and Mafia activity constantly clipping through the news cycles. Eventually, this museum would be shut down due to a lack of interest, and Patey would move the wall to a popular 1920s-themed nightclub in Vancouver, Canada, named the Banjo Palace. The brick wall would find a home in the men's restroom covered in plexiglass so as to avoid the wall being directly sprayed. It is what you think. In the men's room, the wall was covered with plexiglass, and in front were urinal targets for men to practice their aim. And once again, women are characteristically left out of all the fun of organized crime history. I have to say, as a personal note, if I were to go to Vancouver, Canada to see the wall of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, I would be thrilled by the opportunity, and then to find out that it was behind the door of the men's room and being used as target practice would be disappointing, to say the very least. This nightclub wouldn't last long, and soon Patey would once again be stuck with these bricks. He sold some bricks off individually before selling off a large number of them in 1996 for $200,000. Not a bad haul. It's a good thing that Patey didn't take these bricks to the men on Pawn Stars, because he would have never gotten that price out of them. Anyway, the bricks ultimately landed in the possession of the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, although there is one brick you can see in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the Gerald Ford Museum. The bricks winding up at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas is a perfect segue into our next most haunted mob location, and that is the Mob Museum itself. We'll continue following the bricks from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre into the Mob Museum. The wall itself has been described as a place of a particular negative energy. To be fair, if I had suffered this wall's fate year after year by drunk patrons at a bar, I would probably be giving off some negative energy myself. Specific ghost sightings are not as visible at this display, although many report a cold, negative feeling when nearby the wall. I would personally attribute that to thoughtful reflection on a horrible thing that happened in the past, but I'm not going to keep interjecting skepticism into this video because this is all for fun for the spooky season. Another exhibit that is first of all an impressive find, but secondly a place of reported ghostly presence, is the barber chair in which Albert Anastasia was slain. A classic mob story that we have covered on this channel, so make sure to check it out. I'll go ahead and give you the conclusion though. Albert Anastasia, in true cinematic fashion, was murdered while sitting in a barber's chair waiting on a shave. It's reported that when the gunman walked into the building, that Anastasia lunged for the reflection instead of the perp, and swiftly was gunned down. I think the only way that this could have been more cinematic is if the barber himself had been a hired killer and he had slit Anastasia's throat with the razor he was supposed to shave him with, but who am I to critique Cosa Nostra on the dramatics? Anyway, it's at this chair in the Mob Museum that many report feeling a ghostly presence. It's reported by paranormal enthusiasts and experts that Anastasia's ghost bitterly returns to this place on a regular basis. Like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre wall, Anastasia's barber chair is reported to radiate negative energy. It has also been suggested that the ghosts of the victims of mobster killings are frequent visitors to the museum, since it gives them comfort to see the exhibits about the ultimate demises of the men who wronged them. But what about the Mob Museum itself? It's obvious that there's an interest from those who enjoy paranormal tours and events, especially in the month of October, and they find themselves drawn to the Mob Museum. Probably because the most fascinating ghost stories aren't those about people who died in their homes surrounded by loved ones in 2005. Murder victims, murderers, and violent, vengeful spirits are the ones that draw a crowd, and where better than the museum dedicated to sharing the stories and histories of some of the country's most vengeful and violent. What adds to the case of the Mob Museum's eerie energy is the building itself. This is naturally going to be a place where ghosts would return if unsettled in the afterlife. The museum is located at 300 Stewart Avenue in Las Vegas, Nevada. This 4-story building, constructed in 1933 in the Classical Revival style, was previously a government building that was used primarily as a post office, but was a part-time courthouse as well on the second floor. For over a decade after the building was opened, it served as a courthouse twice a year when the nearest federal judge traveled from Carson City, about 400 miles away, to hear the Las Vegas cases. As criminal cases and the population of Las Vegas continued to grow, this practice was discontinued in 1945 when a federal judge was assigned to Vegas. I don't envy that position. Talk about never having a normal day at work. Anyway, this courthouse really picked up steam when on November 15th, 1950, the U.S. Senate Special Committee to Investigate Organized Crime in Interstate Commerce, led by Tennessee Senator Estes Kefauver, heard testimony in the courtroom on the second floor. It should be noted here, however, that the Las Vegas portion of the Kefauver hearings were widely seen as a disappointment. Many high-profile casino owners, such as Modalitz, had received subpoenas and were expected to have their practices brought to bear during this time, but these men skipped town. In all, these hearings were very anticlimactic. The committee members were tired from having investigated this for 5 months, plus the travel to Las Vegas. All in all, they interviewed 6 very unhelpful witnesses and wrapped the whole thing up within 1 day. As was reported by the Las Vegas Review-Journal at the time, the United States Senate's Crime Investigating Committee blew into town yesterday like a desert whirlwind. And after stirring up a lot of dust, it vanished, leaving only the rustling among prominent local citizens as evidence that it had paid its much-publicized visit here. The disappointing nature of the Las Vegas portion of the Kefauver hearings haven't stopped paranormal investigators from declaring the building a hotbed of activity for guilty ghosts. After all, it's not only the Kefauver hearings that took place here. Many a mobster was marched through the hallways and into the courtroom on the second floor, and that is where most of the paranormal reports come from. The second floor of the building is where the most activity is reported. People have said that they see apparitions of floating shadows that make the area tense and unhappy. Cold spots and spirits are also said to be felt in the courtroom itself. Perhaps this could also be attributed to the fact that this building is one of the few historic buildings still standing in Las Vegas. Unlike many major cities in the US, a focus on urban renewal has been a constant in the desert city and means that the buildings that are preserved stick out against the modern backdrop. And ghosts are going to want to go to places that are familiar to them, right? What I found most interesting about these reports are they have been reported for years, predating the February 14th, 2012 opening of the Mob Museum. Also, just have to say, Valentine's Day as the opening day for the Mob Museum, that was an excellent choice. The Mob Museum leans into this mysterious nature. The website itself suggests that perhaps the reason this building was preserved while so many others are destroyed to make way for new infrastructure is because city officials were afraid of what they might find in the building's foundation. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying that the Mob Museum has an unsettling location brimming with the history of some of the country's most violent. And also people who wanted to send their grandma a nice letter or buy a roll of stamps, but their ghosts are probably boring. Organized crime in general seems like a topic that would be rife with ghost stories, and again, while there are several, there just simply aren't as many as I would have expected to find when I started this research. I will say though, the ones that do exist are quite odd, and perhaps the more terrifying accounts of Cosa Nostra spirits aren't spoken of because, much as they did in life, the mafiosi have silenced their victims. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews discussing Mafia hauntings and paranormal organized crime findings. Although this is a deviation from the regularly scheduled content on this show, I thought it might be fun to do something seasonal with you today, and I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to let me know in the comment section below or on Facebook and Twitter what you think about the stories I've shared with you today. And also, use the comment section in social media to tell me about stories that you've heard. I suspect that a lot of these stories are going to be more localized and therefore harder to find online. So if you have any Mafia stories, ghost stories specifically, about your area, I would love to hear about them below. Also, don't forget to utilize that comment section in social media to let me know about who or what you would like to see covered next. I always love hearing from you, and I'm always happy to investigate. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click notifications to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao.